Hi guys, today I want to discuss my thoughts on human self-domestication. Scientists have discovered a surprising reversal in our species, that our brains are not as small as they have been at any time in the past 100,000 years, over 10% smaller. At the same time, our encephalization, brain size relative to body mass, has also declined. This decrease is in contrast to the general evolutionary tendency of the human cranial capacity to increase. Why did our brain size start to shrink? There have been different theories which have tried to unfold the alarming reduction in our brain size and encephalization. The more talked about conjecture is self-domestication, which proposes that people became tamer and less aggressive in order to work with each other. I have a few questions on this hypothesis, and I want to present 3 of them to you. I would love to know what you think after hearing them. According to Richard Wrangham, a primatologist at Harvard University, and Brian Hare, a professor of evolutionary anthropology at Duke University, our brain volume decrease trend is selection against aggression. In short, that we domesticated ourselves. Domesticated animals like sheep, pigs, cats, and dogs have smaller brains. Their brain sizes are 10 to 25% smaller than their wild ancestors and wild counterparts. For instance, a wolf-sized dog has a brain around 10% smaller than its wild ancestor. Domesticated animals also have lower EQ, encephalization quotient, which presents as a generally reduced brain volume relative to body size. Studies have found a close relationship between intelligence and EQ. So, the domesticated animals are likely to be less intelligent than the feral ones. Reduced brain size, reduced encephalization, and tamer temperaments are all parts of the domestication syndrome. Such a phenomenon has been observed by multiple researchers. Paleontologist Annabelle Carso and her team studied the average brain size relative to body size for wild versus domesticated cattle. They found that domesticated cattle has brains about 25% smaller than their wild forebears. On top of that, they discovered that bullfighting breeds, which are bred for aggression, have brain sizes nearly as large as those of wild aurochs. In essence, compared to domesticated animals, feral and wild counterparts have significantly larger brains and a higher brain-to-body mass ratio. Wild animals are smarter, more aggressive, and need to fend for themselves. The domesticated ones have smaller brains, they're tamer, compliant, and depend solely on humans for feeding and management. From that point of view, if we humans domesticated ourselves, then our average brain size would probably become smaller just like other domesticated animals. Our current brain size is about 10 to 17% smaller than people from 40,000 years ago. This percentage decrease is in the same ballpark as the ones we see across the board for domesticated species. Modern people might be less aggressive and more social than our predecessors. Therefore, self-domestication seems to be a reasonable proposal to explain our diminishing brain size. But I have a few questions. In order to consider and further accept the self-domestication hypothesis, these questions will need to be discussed and answered. First, is self-domestication the only way for humans to work with each other? The prominent scientists who support this self-domestication hypothesis argue that our brain size getting smaller is because we domesticated ourselves to be less aggressive, tamer, and docile, so humans can work and cooperate together as a group. As we know, human genuses from the beginning are social animals. Primates have always lived within communities. Today's hominins, besides our modern humans, are chimpanzees and bonobos. They are our distant cousins. Chimpanzees live in groups which consist of up to 150 individuals. Bonobos groups are also fairly large with up to 120 members. This is interesting because 150 is the Dunbar's number, which was established by British anthropologist Robin Dunbar. he identified a correlation between primate brain size and average social group size. The claim is that an average person can only really maintain about 150 connections, such as friends and acquaintances, at once. This rule of 150 remains true for early hunter-gatherer societies as well as our modern groupings. Offices, communes, factories, residential campsites, military organizations, and more. Exceeding 150, a network is unlikely to last long or cohere well. In this sense, the social group sizes of chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans are almost identical. These primates have been working and relying on one another for millions of years. Have they domesticated themselves? Professor Hare suspects that bonobos are domesticated versions of chimpanzees. Wrangham and Hare both see parallels between bonobo development and our own possible self-domestication. While bonobos and chimpanzees are both genetically and behaviorally very similar, they also differ in significant ways. Bonobos are more cautious, peaceful, and socially tolerant, while chimpanzees are more aggressive and can be violent. Hare highlights how bonobos have a built-in disposition that resembles domesticated species, and they also have smaller brains. But how about the EQ or encephalization quotients between these two animals? Let's not forget that even though bonobos have smaller brain volume compared to chimps, their body sizes are smaller too. A bigger individual with more muscles naturally requires more brains to function. If bonobos are really domesticated chimps, then their EQ should be smaller as well. But is this actually the case? From a published 2012 paper, I found information which points to the opposite direction. In this paper, I read that the average chimpanzee brain volume is 398 cubic centimeters, or cc. The average bonobo brain volume is 358 cc, 10% smaller than that of the chimps. This study listed the cranial sizes and body weights of the animals. We can see the average bonobo weighs 37.73 kilograms and chimps 52.25 kilograms. If we take the body size, in this case body weight, into consideration, then this turns out that bonobos have larger encephalization than chimpanzees. Studies with large samples are definitely needed, but based on this report, the docile and social bonobos have higher encephalization than the more aggressive chimps, which indicates that bonobos might not be the domesticated version of chimpanzees. On another note, many wild animals, such as lions, hyenas, elephants, dolphins, and whales, work in groups, generations after generations. The survival of their species depends on the pack for food and safety. Have these animals domesticated themselves? I don't think so. These wild animals are not considered to be self-domesticated, yet they rely on teamwork and cooperation as well. Where do we draw the line between self-domestication and natural animal instinct of group work? Lionesses in the same pack have strong bonds. They hunt together, care for all the cubs even if not their own, and share their food. At the same time, they are feral as feral can be. This means that maybe we don't need to be self-domesticated or tamed to work as a group. Now for my second question. As I mentioned earlier, studies have found domesticated animals have smaller brains and lower encephalization. Feral animals are smarter and more aggressive with larger brains. But is this the case with the humans? Are more aggressive people in general smarter than tame and docile people? I assume that scientists, on average, are less aggressive. They're brainy and likely possess higher EQ. They're not in need of great physical strength to do their work and earn a living, and they're typically calm and mild-tempered. While really aggressive people or hardcore bullies usually use fists or physical strength to do their talking. How about psychopaths? They're aggressive and really smart, right? Psychopath being highly intelligent is a very common misconception. probably created by pop culture and Hollywood with their fictional portrayals of evil genius or supervillain characters. In reality, scientists found there is no evidence that psychopaths are more intelligent than people who don't have psychopathic traits. And the correlation between psychopathy and intelligence is nearly zero. In addition, some studies discover that, in general, psychopaths seem to have below-average intelligence. For example, criminologist and associate professor Brian Boutwell and his colleagues analyzed the results of 187 published papers on intelligence and psychopathy. These papers included research on psychopaths in prison, as well as those enjoying high-flying careers. They found, in fact, that psychopaths, on average, scored notably lower on intelligence tests. In another study, after scanning nearly 700 volunteers from birth, researchers noticed that lifelong criminals have smaller brains. Small brains might be a link to long-term antisocial behavior. Earlier, we talked about domesticated animals being tame with smaller brains, while their wild counterparts are aggressive with larger brains. But this seemed to be contrary with humans, because generally the most aggressive, antisocial people, such as long-term criminals, might have smaller brains. Psychopaths overall are not highly intelligent and might have even below-average IQs. On the other hand, scientists and people with advanced degrees are normally mild-mannered and not aggressive. This is a 180 reversal from the domesticated animal syndrome. Bigger-brained humans are not particularly aggressive like bigger-brained feral animals. That makes me question whether we can use the current animal domestication observations as guides to project human self-domestication. Hominins didn't evolve in the same path as most animals. The evolution process of most, if not all, other animals are mainly physical. Some gain amazing speeds, some have incredible biting power. However, hominins, instead of growing claws, sharper teeth, or stronger, longer legs to help us run faster, have instead become highly encephalized, whereby we developed much bigger brains relatively to our body size. This is one of the main characteristics that sets us apart from other animals. Modern humans are the last surviving human in Homo genus, and we dominate the world. Humans got to this position not because we grew physically stronger or faster. It has everything to do with the increased brain size. The human evolution is not really a physical one, but a cranial one. As our brains grew, we developed tool-making and complex planning abilities and established societies. Even though the human brain is only about 2% of our body weight, it consumes almost a quarter of our energy input. With the increasing brain power and caloric intake it required, our muscles shrunk, while other mammals remain much more muscular than us. Our survival and dominance depended on our increased brain size and cognitive capacity, but not brute strength. Otherwise, our more robust and now extinct relative, the Neanderthals, would probably have been living here today instead of us. The Neanderthals were stronger and more muscular than modern humans, and they have even larger brains. Though with a larger body, their EQ is smaller than ours. Thus, the Neanderthals were probably less intelligent than us. It's conceivable that brain size changes in hominins and other mammals are not really comparable. Therefore, using animal domestication syndrome to compare human brain size decline might not be appropriate. That leads to my third and final question today. If the animal domestication model might not work on humans, then what about our relatives, the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and other archaic hominins? Did they get self-domesticated? Hominins all lived in communities and worked in groups. The Neanderthals emerged in Europe as far back as 400,000 years ago. They coexisted with modern humans for hundreds of thousands of years before eventually became extinct about 28,000 years ago. Multiple archaeological findings have proven that the Neanderthals were quite smart and loving, They painted, cared for their wounded, and buried their dead, very much like the early modern humans. If there is self-domestication in archaic humans, then this phenomenon likely has had a much longer history and should be observed from other hominins like the Neanderthals as well. Then did the Neanderthals domesticate themselves? A 2019 study suggests that modern humans domesticated themselves after they split from Neanderthals and Denisovans approximately 600,000 years ago, which in a way suggests that these researchers didn't consider Neanderthals having domesticated themselves. According to this study, Homo sapiens started self-domestication about 600,000 years ago, and domestication leads to smaller brains and docile temperament. Then we should have seen brain size decline starting 600,000 years ago. But this is not the case, because human brain size and encephalization continued to grow bigger for 500,000 years, and peaking around 100,000 years ago. It's only during the last 100,000 years that our cranial size and encephalization decreased. How come the domestication process caused two opposite effects? At first, with an increased brain size and then decreased. Some learned professors argue that self-domestication resulted in smaller human brains and tamer people, so they could work in groups. But the human species have always worked in groups and lived within a community. Hominins evolved for over 3 million years, and the volume of the human brain has nearly tripled during this long period of time. They lived and worked with each other from the get-go, and have been doing so for millions of years. They were capable of social communication and collaboration through the time when their brain sizes kept growing. They didn't need to be domesticated to have a reduced brain size to be tame enough to work with one another. So, there you have it, my 3 questions, which conflict with, if not challenge, the human self-domestication hypothesis. Is self-domestication really the reason to explain our declining brain size? I would like to hear your thoughts on this subject. I think it's likely that more than one factor led to the recent reduction in brain size. Human self-domestication might have occurred during certain time frames and influenced brain size changes, but it's far from conclusive. If you have any insights, please leave me a comment. If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel and share with others. You can also support me on Patreon, which is a monthly charge, kind of like you buying me a cup of coffee once a month. I appreciate your support. This is Curious Being. I'm Tina. Thanks for watching and see you next time.